How's it going, guys? I thought I'd give you a little bit of an update on what's been going on this week, so we can, kind of stay on base by seeing each other and communicating. First things first, I just want to say I'm really loving the conversation that I'm seeing on the discussion section. That's great. That makes everything so much easier and more fun for me. I love getting up every morning and checking those discussions. I can tell some of you guys stay up pretty late too. Some of those responses are coming at like 4:55 in the morning. So I don't know if that's because you're up late or you're waking up early. Either way, it doesn't matter to me. That's what's great about this is that you can kind of do it whatever way you want. So keep doing those discussions, and then I'll get out my Q&A video at the end of the week. So to just kind of touch base today, since we'll be talking about World War I, and next week I'll have another podcast audio lecture that'll go along with next week's unit as well. So today is kind of a little check-in. I want to tell you about what I read when I read World War I. You can see behind me is my personal library that I have here at home, and if you can take a guess, it's mainly history. I got some fiction in there, but a lot of it's going to be history related. So I thought I'd share with you guys what I read on certain subjects. So today I'm going to talk about a few World War I books that I personally have loved. I've got a couple new ones in that I'm looking forward to reading. So I just wanted to share some classics with you. I do want to forewarn you, the camera is reversed, and I just realized this. So if I hold up a book, it's backwards. That will hopefully be fixed sometime soon. It's these Surface Pro cameras. I need to get an external camera so that way when I show you stuff, it won't be backwards. I guess I could show you the spine and you could read it that way. But for today, excuse me, but I'm going to put the links to these books in the description of the video. So that way, if you're interested, you can check them out. If not, I understand that not everyone's into reading history like I am. But I thought I'd just share with you guys, what I read to, for the subjects that I really love. So I'm going to start with the book that I have here. It's All Quiet on the Western Front. And this is by Erich Remarque. I think it's Remarque. So I actually read this book when I was in middle school. So it came out in the 1920s. Very old book. It is a novel, actually. So it is a fiction book about a German soldier in World War I. It is arguably one of the most famous war novels of all time. Even on the front, it says the greatest war novel of all time. So this is a fantastic book. It's a very quick read. It from say start to finish, we're looking at about 300 pages. Not a very long read. It's for all ages, honestly. I mean, it's written about a guy who was in his late teens when he joined up. So it's a German soldier in World War I. There has been a couple movies, made for TV movies about it. So it's one of the most famous war novels, and he said about a German soldier in World War I, and it is called All Quiet on the Western Front because that's where the soldier participated in France. So if you want a good starting spot to kind of really get an idea of what the daily drudgery was like, All Quiet on the Western Front is a great place to start. Along that same line of first-person accounts, I actually have another German account, but this is a actual account. This is called Storm of Steel. And this is one I just got in the mail actually 2 days ago. So I'm super excited about reading it. I've heard about it for a really long time. And it's by a guy named Ernst Junger. And he fought in World War I. So these are actual accounts. And I'm actually going to read from some of this when I do my next lecture. And it's just a great blow-by-blow account of what goes on, what life was like in the trenches, and kind of he does a really good job of describing the visceral sounds and smells that are kind of hard to understand if you weren't there, but he does a pretty good job of portraying that. And the edition that I got too, it's got really cool artwork and cover on it. So it's always good to have. I'm a really big book snob, so I'm always like, oh, this is a good looking book. So it's Storm of Steel, and that is by Ernst Junger, and that is another great place to start. Also, not very long. I don't even think this one breaks. This one doesn't even break 300 pages. So if you're interested, once again, in what life was like for a soldier, there's a great place to start. So I'd say those are fantastic starting books, All Quiet on the Western Front and Storm of Steel, both from the German perspective. This also gives you a little bit of a different outlook, not just from an American or British that tends to dominate our literature. A good general overview of the war itself. This is a book I got when I was a kid, and I use it for you guys' class, actually. Every single time I teach World War I break out this book, and it's simply called Great Battles of World War One. I know, once again, reversed. I apologize. This is a fantastic book. It's done by a series of editors, and it was originally done by a publisher called Smithmark. I'm not even sure it's still in being published, but I'm sure if you check out Amazon, you could find it out. What I love about this book is it's an oversized book and has great pictures, and there's a map at the beginning of World War I with the different powers set out there, and pictures of uniforms. And my favorite part of this, and this still is, I was actually looking at this the other day at the kitchen table, getting excited about it, is I have a huge section of the Battle of Jutland, which was the largest naval battle, and it's got this really cool fold out. I don't know if you can see that there. It's got this huge picture of the battle and the battleships, and it's what the insides of the turrets look like. It's really cool. So this just covers all of the major battles, how the war started, how it ended, and it's just a great overview. Whenever I come to researching subject in history, I always have different types of books that I like to go off of. So you have your reference book, right? So maybe not a book you read front to back. You have your novels, and you have your first personal accounts, right? Those are like these two. And then you can get into some more specific details. So one of the books that I read in college that if you have any interest over the Naval War, this is like the book to read. And it's called Castles of Steel by Robert K. Massie. Now this is a beast. For your average high schooler, probably not your book you're going to be reading. But if you have any interest over the Naval War, so if you like battleships and submarines, and you like kind of the weapons and the ships involved and the personalities, and there are some huge personalities involved. Winston Churchill, he became famous for World War II, but he actually fought in World War I in the Admiralty, and he's a big part of this book as well. So this is a pretty thick one, but I mean, you can see I'm actually in the process of rereading it right now. This is the book. If you want to know about naval warfare in World War I, this is it right here. And it does a good job of talking about how it's not just all about trenches. It's also about, this war going on around the world and on the seas. So that's a really good book. So Castles of Steel by Robert Massie. Along that same realm of naval war, this is one I just got in the mail with Storm of Steel, is The Wolf. Now this is a fascinating story that I can't wait to read, and it is about a German merchant raider. So that's the Wolf right there. And in World War I, Great Britain dominated the seas. Even though Germany had a big navy, they still couldn't be as good as the British. So they had to get very inventive about trying to sink British ships. One way they would do that, they would actually disguise these things called merchant raiders. So if you saw these ships from a distance, they would look like a cruise liner or a cargo ship. But once you got closer, you realized they had guns on them. And the guns would often be hidden. And so these would travel around and they wouldn't look like a warship. So they could sneak in and out of ports, and they would sink British shipping. So the Wolf was arguably the most famous merchant raider. And for almost 2 whole years, she terrorized the seas as far as Australia. She launched from Germany and she goes all the way to Australia. And because the captain was very noble, he never wanted to kill the people on his ship, so he took them as prisoners. So as the voyage of the Wolf goes on, the ship accumulates more and more prisoners. And we're talking about passengers from famous singers to poets. So by the end of the Wolf's journey, when it's finally caught, she's sunken dozens of ships, British, Australian, New Zealand ships, and she has on board a very eclectic crew of captives and romances and scandal. It's crazy. And it all takes place on a boat that's trying to sink other ships. So this is one I'm really excited to get into. It's just called The Wolf, the mystery raider that terrorized the seas of World War I. So I'm excited to get into this one. It's kind of like mystery and warfare all wrapped up into one. The last one I'm going to talk about here is arguably my favorite author of all time, and that guy is Max Hastings. Max Hastings is a historian bar none. I mean, he is one of my all-time favorites. Actually, if you look at my bookshelf, all of these books right here are Max Hastings books, and usually this goes right there in that spot. So he is he's a journalist. He's from Great Britain, and he also writes a lot of history. This is his book just called Catastrophe, 1914 by Max Hastings. And it is all about the first year of the war in World War I. So it has a really good description of how the war breaks out and also how bloody the first year was. And that's because there weren't trenches. We tend to think about how trench warfare is bloody, but at least you're in a trench. The opening of the war was guys with trumpets blaring and flags waving, charging against machine guns, not even in trenches. So the first year of the war is incredibly bloody and fascinating. And he doesn't just talk about the British. He talks about the Austrian invasion of Serbia, which fails abysmally, and also what's going on in Russia. So it's a great encapsulation of the first year of the war. Once again, a little bit heftier book. Let's see, what's it run at? Not including footnotes, we're looking at about 500 pages. But he's a journalist, so the way he writes is phenomenal. He's a journalist. Well, he started off as a journalist and he became a historian. I cannot recommend him enough. Like, if you want to read any history book and it is written by Max Hastings, you will enjoy it. He mainly writes about World War II. I'm currently reading his book on the Vietnam War, but this was one of my all-time favorites when it came to World War I. So there is one final one I wanted to mention, and that is this one right here. Forgot about this one. This one is called Pyrrhic Victory. It's called Pyrrhic Victory. I don't know if you guys remember from history, we talked about how Epirus was a guy who fought against the Romans, and he defeated the Romans in a battle, but he took so many casualties that he said that if I win one more battle like that, I'm going to lose the war. So a Pyrrhic victory is something that means that you won, but you lost so much that it basically isn't even a win. So this is about the French in World War I and how awful an experience it was for them. They're on the winning side. I mean, remember, the French win World War I. They defeat the Germans. And they are the lion's share of the fighting. We tend to forget about France in World War I as it's fought in France. But because in the United States, we mainly listen and read English literature, we tend to focus on the British side of things, or obviously on the American side of things. But we forget the fighting's in France on the Western Front. So the vast majority of soldiers will be French. And this book does a great job, Pyrrhic Victory, talking just about the French side of things. The commanders involved, the soldiers. This is a little bit more of a technical book, so I would not recommend this as like a first outing into World War I. But if you want to dive into it, this is a great place to go. There's other couple of books I don't physically have on me because they're my brother's books, actually. So one of my favorites is called The Somme. It's Somme. And by a guy named Prior, Prior. And once again, I'll link that in the description. And that's a book just over the Battle of the Somme. And I read the book in college, and it was one of the most eye-opening books I read in terms of what a World War I battle actually looks like. And how it's all about artillery. I mean, if the artillery doesn't do its job, you're done. I mean, and that's a book that really opened my eyes to just how futile any kind of effort was without artillery. So those are just some books that I read on World War I. That is by no means all of them. But that is just a selection of some of the few. So like I said, I'll link those in the description. And I kind of just want to have another chat with you guys. So if you have any other interests of books, let me know and I can guide you in the right direction. So there's some other introductory World War I books that are great to read that I haven't mentioned. It's like I could throw those out there as well. So when it comes to any subject in history, right, I think it's always great to find that, like a good book that'll really get you involved in it. And it doesn't have to be books sometimes, like video games. That's another big thing for me. I mean, when I was a kid, I used to play a game and then be like, oh, I want to learn more about that and what they did in history. So there's all kinds of great starting points for that. And I'll try to do some of these book chats for other subjects we do in history too, because as you can see, I have a lot of books to talk about, and this isn't even my whole shelf. It goes up one higher and there's one lower as well. So I'll just go ahead and end it there. Make sure you guys keep commenting on those discussions, and you guys will be getting your Q&A later at the end of the week. So I'll see you guys then. Bye.